September 21st, 1970. The Free Life disappeared over the North Atlantic. In the subsequent search, no trace of the balloon was ever found.
Anderson came out and he said he was looking for a place to launch a balloon. It had been all over. And this seemed ideal. There was no obstructions between here and the wall.
I woke one morning, I think it was last October, and looked out my bedroom windows, which directly confront the George Sid Miller's field. And instead of saying the usual occupants of the field, a beautiful palomino who was the beau of the pasture, and some other quarter horses of various colors, and two donkeys of whom I'm very fond, who actually say hee-haw. Instead of this cast of characters, I saw, in amongst the trees that the horses fancy, a bright orange, totally unexplained UFO.
I'm standing in the middle of a pasture in East Hampton, Long Island. Usually the pasture is reserved for the horses, although here at 5:30 in the morning I don't see any horses around. What I do see is a balloon, 8 stories high, reaching way up into the sky. The balloon is lit by searchlights from below and backlit by the moon above. There's no pollution around here so that you can see the stars clearly. Several hundred people are waiting for the Free Life to take off for Europe, bearing 3 people: Malcolm Brighton, who will be the pilot, Rod Anderson, who financed the whole thing, and Rod's wife, Pamela. It's a beautiful day. The scene is like something out of Jules Verne. Absolutely astounding. This is John Lyons in East Hampton, Long Island. You have a company which builds balloons. What do you think of this balloon?
Obviously I'm prejudiced because I'm a balloon builder. I think I could have done better, but at this stage, here and now, inflated and ready to go, I feel optimistic.
Where do you want to come down?
Anywhere on land.
All right, down yet? No, we gotta go forward. All right, forward. Okay.
That's about it, right?
You're not pulling it away from me, you're pulling it out that way.
This way, just pull it out. Not away from me. I want this back here.
New York. I read you think 5, New York, over. Okay, you're loud and clear. From Pan American, they advise that you are on the fringe of a cold front. You're on the fringe of a cold front, roughly, extending roughly from 60 west to 40 west, and moving south. The north of the fringe area of the cold front is about 45 degrees north. New York. Thank you, I read you. Standing by. New York.
We can use this for balance. Here, Pam, you can have your bubble gum back.
Thank you.
Andy,
Yes?
we heard you were the last one who had a tan on the balloon. How'd that feel?
Well, it felt great. It felt like I was part of something. Really enjoyed it.
I don't know, just about everything. We have supplied all of the food for the balloon. My wife and I from Barnes Country Store have supplied all the food, except the emergency rations. And the emergency rations were supplied by other companies.
The way of people helping, doing things. Like one fellow was making some shells in the gondola. Is that the right name for it? And it was as if he was making them in a little coffee pot, you know, where you put the dishes. And I don't mean it was amateurish, but the combination of the very technical possibilities of it, and then the working of the people giving the helping hand. That was fascinating.
Could you give me the upper level of the cumulus, please? Over. Understand you're requesting the upper level of the cumulus. Go ahead. Affirmative. November 2079 again. Go ahead, please, Andrew. Okay, the top of the heavy cumulus, 20 to 20,000. 18 to 20,000. That's from the mid office camera. Go ahead.
Just like that, just like that.
Attaboy, Andy. Okay, let us sit right there. That ought to do. Give me that one behind you. These one run alongside of each other?
Brando, number 2079, we are ditching. We are not certain of our exact location. Last check, 2 hours from today, approximately 100 miles west of Delta. Station Delta, over. 2079 again, say again, please. We are ditching. November 2079 is going into the water. We are ditching. Over. November 2079er is ditching going into the water. Go ahead. That is correct. We will have an emergency beacon on 121.5. Over. We will have an emergency beacon on 121.5. Go ahead. We request search and rescue. Over. Requesting search and rescue and confirm you're approximately 100 miles west of Delta. Go ahead. Approximately 100 miles west of Station Delta. Our last line reading of 181 was 1903. Over. Okay, your last line reading at 181, 1905. That was a 22 Zulu. Over. 2200 Zulu, Roger. We are now at 600 feet and descending. Over. Now at 600 feet and descending. And now sounding off in order to go through the safest possible landing procedure. Over and out.
Anderson, they really worked hard, and you have a project where you go hours and hours without sleep, and it comes at a time when you don't always make the right decision. And while the balloon had a hole in the side, and he tried to patch it, the patch didn't stay. So I can see how it was. When he got ready, the wind came right, he said, to hell with it, let's go.
Okay, everybody on. Come on!
Excuse me. What do you feel like? I think I'm only let. Everybody let go!
There is something enormously attractive about ballooning. It's impossible practically to describe this beauty up there, this incredible stillness and the the no wind thing, you know, is just incredible. It's the only way to hear the true noise of the sea, because on any other conditions you've got the wind blowing over your ears if you're standing on the beach, or you've got the noise of a boat or something around you, but up there with total silence around you, the noise of the sea is just coming up at you.
Anthony Smith, himself an eminent balloonist and journalist, introduced the sport to Britain following his ventures across Africa. He first travelled by motorbike, which proved an unsuccessful way to record the landscape, but then he retraced his journey by a balloon named Jambo, which flew silently over the animals, and he was then able to write his journal, Throw Out Two Hands, from an aerial point of view.
Well, then I joined up with Malcolm Brighton, who became a very good friend, and we basically set ourselves up as we'll do anything in the light of an air business. And so we flew a balloon in the film Charlie Bubbles with Albert Finney. We made an airship for the film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which was the most terrifying thing, and we flew that over Buckinghamshire, trying to do what the filmmakers wanted.
For Malcolm Brighton, by now a recognised pilot holding the first ever British balloon licence, one great challenge still remained out of reach: the Atlantic Ocean. In 1970, he was given the opportunity to make an attempt at the west to east crossing with an American, Rod Anderson. His pilot, Jim Contos, had pulled out after 4 years of planning, believing the balloon, the Free Life, had grievous faults. But Brighton's passion for ballooning made him determined to be the first man to free fly the Atlantic.
Everything's in our favor.
The Free Life was, in some ways, a very exciting and in some ways a very daft idea. A lot of the people who thought it was very exciting was because it wasn't sufficiently prepared, but those were in the happy flower-powered 1960s, and the Free Life was a very good name just for taking off to try and be the first balloon to cross the Atlantic. The Channel, the English Channel, had been crossed in 1785, and one or two people had tried rather half-heartedly across the Atlantic, and this was the first very determined try. The balloon was a gas balloon which was heated with hot air, so that can compensate to some extent for the fact that the night is a cooler time. The balloon tends to sink at that time. The helium was the gas, and they took off from Long Island. There were 3 of them. Slightly daft in that the other 2 had not been in a balloon before, or rather one of them had a very short flight. Malcolm Brighton was a very experienced balloonist, but he hadn't been in charge of the design of this balloon, and it had some fairly grievous faults in that you could not separate the gondola of the balloon from the envelope when you came down in the sea. So you came down with a gondola, however unsinkable, which was attached to a huge spinnaker of a sail in front of you, and I don't know quite what happens when you come down in a sea when that is going on. In theory, you should be able to get out into your life raft. In practice, they landed in a storm, and this was after they travelled 1,400 miles, I believe, and were about 400 miles southeast of Newfoundland. So they were a long way from base, but also a long way from any kind of help. The storm came up, and it was obviously too much for any of them to be able to get into that life raft. I think the pressure was on tremendously for them to go, partly because all the journalists were there. That's pressure. I don't think they were realistic in the Free Life. I think at all times when you're about to go, then you worry and you say, well, let's go anyway. trouble with the free life, which they hadn't really worked out beforehand, because of their certainty that they would land, and on European land, and on French land, was they hadn't really worked out the business of what to do when coming down into the water. And this is really what killed them. The boat itself, the gondola, was unsinkable, and it was made of fiberglass, I think, and ping-pong balls, so it couldn't sink. But it had a tremendous quantity of radio equipment in it, a tremendous quantity of food, which after the 30 hours that they'd been up, been very little consumed, I imagine. So they then came down when they had been told by the weather people at Gander that the clouds were up to 20,000 feet. So in other words, they couldn't go above that because they'd be too cold and short of oxygen and so forth. And they were in this storm, so they decided to land.
We are pitching. November 2079 is going into the water. We are pitching. Over. November 2079 is ditching, going into the water. Go ahead. That is correct. We will have an emergency beacon on 121.5. Over. We will have an emergency beacon on 121.5. Go ahead. We request search and rescue. Over. Requesting search and rescue, and confirm you're approximately 100 miles west of Kyoto. Go ahead. We are now at 600 feet and descending. Over. Now at 600 feet and descending. And now sounding off in order to go through the safest possible landing procedure.
Well, I don't know quite what they should have done on landing, but I'm sure there was a bit of panic and unhappiness around, particularly among the two people who'd never been in a balloon before. Because I found on even an ordinary balloon landing in an ordinary English field on a nice day, these other people who haven't done it before get all tense and much more likely to sprain their ankle than the balloonist, who is acting rather like a parachutist. He's done it before and he knows how to let his body fall about. They had this completely circular gondola, more like a saucer, and that had 12 tapes going up to the ring above. And so somehow they had to get their inflatable dinghy, which alas hadn't been tested. They had to get that outside the gondola without letting go of it. And then when they hit the water with the gondola, they had to get out of the gondola and into the dinghy. Well, nobody knows for sure how high the waves were, but they were very considerable, and this was the Atlantic, and it's not a very happy place at the best of times, and that was too much for them, plainly, because nothing was ever found of the balloon, nothing was ever found of them, and even their emergency transmitter beacon didn't work afterwards, and that thing should have floated on its own account.
The dream had ended for the Free Life. In complete darkness, they hit high seas, estimated at 40 feet. They went down without trace, over 1,000 miles out to sea. The Atlantic claimed many more lives until it was finally conquered in August 1978 by an American team in a Zanussi balloon, Double Eagle 2.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I can't believe this crowd. I'm so thrilled. I'm Jeannie Henderson, and this afternoon I'm kind of wearing two hats. My first hat is I'm the archivist at LTV, and we've got the LTV cameras here, and we're hoping to record people's recollections if they were there, and barking, and also questions from people who weren't there that are just curious about this amazing event that took place in Springs 45 years ago today. And it was a gorgeous day, just like today, a little cooler. People gathered in the field. They were supposed to leave at dawn. People gathered all night long. At dawn, the wind was wrong, and so everybody went to Barnes Country Store and various other places and got picnics, and everybody waited until 1 o'clock, which is when the winds finally changed, and they were heading towards Europe. And it was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful launch, kind of miraculous. Nobody had ever seen anything like it before, and I don't think people see these kind of things today, even though ballooning is a much more popular sport. Any rate, So they were 30 hours in the air, and then they got caught in a cold front and a storm somewhere south of Newfoundland. They could not get above the clouds, which is what they were hoping to do, because the clouds were 20,000 feet. So, and they didn't have, oxygen or anything like that. And to go below the clouds, they lost the wind, so they decided to go into the water. And they sent a message to Gander, and we have that on the film, the last message from the balloon. And the last message was, we're at 600 feet and descending. We request search and rescue. Signing off now to make the safest possible landing at sea. And they were never heard from again, and there was a 3-week, almost a month-long search by the Canadian Coast Guard, the American Coast Guard, the American Navy, me, all sorts of people. There was 3 different searches mounted. I was on 2 of the search planes, and nothing, not a trace of anything was ever found. So that's the story in a nutshell. But over the years, a lot of stories have arisen and myths have cropped up, and people remember things that they feel spelled the doom of the free life. And I can't answer all the questions, but I do, I think, know a lot about it. One of the big issues was there was a tear in the balloon when they left. And we all know if we're giving a party and we have balloons and there's a tear in the balloon pops or it deflates. But this was a very unique balloon because the inner balloon was helium, and that was the lifting power. That was the power of the balloon. The outer balloon was decorative, and it was also to make a little cushion of hot air so that at night when the helium cooled down, they could turn on the propane burner and heat up around the balloon. So the tear, while unfortunate, was very small, was sort of like that. And this was a 7-story tall structure, and it was not deemed to be anything that would cause, problems for the flight. So, but everybody kind of picked up on the tear and, well, they should have never gone, but they did because they didn't feel that that was a deterrent to what they were trying to do. So the whole point is now is to find out who was there, what you thought, ideas, anything, anything that you have to say. I would like to, before we turn it over to everybody, just to say, I'm going to have a glass of water. But in remembering, I'd like to remember the 3 people that were in the balloon. Now, I guess I will get emotional. They were very close friends of mine, and I've missed them for 45 years. Okay, who wants to go first? Yes?
How did they decide who was going to go in the balloon? Because it seems to me, I remember...
They ran into a very unfortunate situation in that the pilot that was supposed to have piloted the balloon, Jim Contos, left the project in July, and they were scheduled to go in August. Now, Pam and Rod have been planning this for 4 years. This had been part of their life for 4 years, and they had put a tremendous amount of effort, money, and enthusiasm and everything else into this project. So you can imagine to have their pilot walk off the set, walk off the project a month before it was supposed to leave was a pretty low blow after 4 years. So they then called Malcolm Brighton in England. His name came up in ballooning circles. He was an experienced balloonist. He was young. He was a risk taker. He built his own balloons. He knew how to build balloons. He was an aeronautical engineer. This was his 100th ascent, so he was very experienced. Rod was always going to go, and then Pam was a last-minute addition, but she was not a last-minute addition on the day of. That's another myth that's grown up, that she ran and jumped in the gondola and said, I'm going. She did not. She was, when Malcolm came over from England, he looked at the project over. He wanted to make some changes. There were all sorts of, things that he needed, and that's why they delayed going in late September. And as we all know out here, late September is not a good time to be anywhere, over the ocean. But the meteorologists in New York guaranteed them that they would keep them in good weather. So there was no argument. Pam asked Malcolm if she could go, and because she weighed 100 pounds and was not a big, burly person, and because she was going to be a photographer on the trip and he needed extra hands, he said yes. And there was no pressure for her to go. And in fact, they didn't announce it until the day before that she was going to go. So,
hi, my name is Barry, and I had a Polaroid camera, and I believe it was Whitmore that had a cherry picker there at one point.
Yes.
Well, I got on the cherry picker, and with the Polaroid camera, I was able to take pictures right into the gondola. And when the balloon got lost, 30 hours or so into the flight, I was contacted by one of the agencies, the search and rescue agencies, and I told them that I had pictures of the gondola, in which they came and got and promised me I would get them back, that they wanted to put it aboard the different search planes so they would know what the gondola inside looked like. Well, I'm still waiting.
Oh.
I wish I had them so I would share it with everybody here today, but.
Yeah, thank you, that's great.
I was just a kid. I was 9 years old. My name's Hillary Osborne. I lived on Oakview Highway next to the Browers. Their family had a house right down from the field. And they just said, we're going, do you want to go? So my sister and I went. I remember being there, and I remember when it left, we all ran with the balloon, and the image on the screen is the one that's in my mind of just, we tried to watch it as long as we could. We wanted to see it as long as we possibly could. And as a 9-year-old, then hearing they were lost, I remember just lying in bed for nights thinking about them. I don't know why, I'm emotional too.
Yeah.
But I remember lying there thinking, well, how did they land and where are they? And in my child's mind, I imagined them nice and safe in the little gondola floating on the sea. And as an adult, I've realized balloons land pretty hard and pretty awful, especially without cutaways and so forth on the ocean. And I lived in Washington for many years, and I heard the picture was hanging in the Smithsonian. And I made a point to go see it. It was taken down years ago, but there was a period of time the Free Life balloon hung in the Smithsonian. And I made a point to go. Yeah,
I didn't know that at all.
For a period of time, many years ago, it was hanging. There was a picture of it on the wall. And I saw it, but I've always remembered it. And
hi.
You just speak out.
Oh, okay. My name is Rosita Benson now. When I saw the balloon go off, it was Rosita Palabay, but my sister and her husband had come over on the ferry on Friday night, and they must have met Malcolm. And my sister's husband was an engineer, so they got to talking, and that's the only time we found out that the balloon was going to go off. So we were there bright and early Saturday, and we were there hours and hours and hours on Saturday, and they had 2 young children. And then we would just go back for meals and then come back and wait and wait and wait, and finally we were back on Sunday. And then finally at Sunday, they said, we have to go back on the ferry. So they left, and there I was standing, waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, they took off. And I was so moved by that. I remember that I went years and years later to the Star to buy the picture of the Free Life. And years later, when I got my MFA in poetry, that was one of the first poems I ever wrote, called The Free Life.
Oh.
Because I felt that it was really the loss of innocence. I was not 9 years old. I was 28 years old. And yet, I think when you see all that hoopla, when you see all that enthusiasm, you cannot believe anything is going to go wrong. And then it took off, and you hear applause on that film, but there was such silence. There was really awe that it was taking off from we felt we were part of history. We were like, we're part of history. They are going to do it. It was such enthusiasm. And then when you heard that there was like not a trace, I had people die before in my life like that. Not like that.
Yeah.
It would be cancer, it would be a car accident, there would be some reason. There was like no reason for this wonderful, miraculous thing to occur. And that really was my loss of innocence.
Yeah.
So, anyone around want to read my poem? They can. I brought my thesis. It's called Free Life. Finally, it was Sunday. All gauges checked. Each nod said one thing. Ready. September 20th, 1970. Dead center. It's Sid Miller's cow pasture. The Free Life swayed insistently. Time. The helium and hot air balloon, heady and brazen, hissed. Time. With pride, we identified the passengers. That one's Rod Anderson. Pam Brown is the Kentucky Fried Chicken heiress. Malcolm Brighton. Is he the husband or the pilot? They waved to us like we were family. We punched each other in the arm. History. We were part of history. They were going to be the first to cross the Atlantic in a hot air balloon. With a shout, the blocks were kicked away. We clapped and then fell silent, awed and shy. The big balloon floated over Uncle George Miller's horse barn, and before we had our fill, it was gone. Without a trace, the radio announcer said. The Times confirmed. 500 miles southwest of Newfoundland, the Free Life disappeared. So many Sundays, so many falls, so many years. We drive past Sid Miller's pasture to see if we can find what we have lost.
Lovely. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. I think that does kind of say it all. It's just wonderful. Who else was there? And yeah.
My tenure might be limited because of her.
Yeah.
My name is Eric Ernst. I was 14 at the time. I can't add much to what anybody else who might remember well that day, because that was the day I discovered mimosas. So we got there really early with, picnic brunches and everything. By about 11 o'clock, I was pretty hammered. And by the time it took off, I was sort of lying on my side, kind of trying to will things from not spinning quite so much. But I did bring, and it's funny because I didn't expect quite as many people. There was an article in Esquire magazine written in 1971, a year later. I think there are 21 copies. It was written by Robert Allen Arthur, who lived just down the street and was a well-known screenwriter and producer. I think the last film he did was All That Jazz. And this was the first 2 or 3 pages of this article pertained specifically to the Free Life balloon and what he perceived as the community's lost innocence, which, in retrospect, looking back at the early 1970s and how we've evolved since, seems rather quaint in its sort of naivete. But the rest of the article is also rather fascinating for anybody who's interested in what it was like the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, early 70s for artists as they started moving out here, because that's when Bob had first moved out here as well. So there are only about 20 or 18 copies left. If you can, share them, whatever. It's really a rather remarkable article, and especially the part at the beginning. Not everybody had the same measure of optimism. He quotes, he's standing with Alfred Crown, who's a well-known film producer, and as the balloon is starting to take off, Al kind of turns to him and says, "Wow, they're in a real hurry to kill themselves, aren't they?" Which Bob said was probably the first time in his life he's ever known a film producer to be actually correct.
Oh, dear.
But the whole point is that it really was a moment of back then where people perceived that we had evolved to the point where the Hamptons weren't what it was supposed to be. And we know now that, in retrospect, that was a rather innocent view.
It was definitely an innocent time. I know somebody wrote that it was the curtain line to the 60s, the flamboyant 60s, and as the 70s, as we got into the 70s, the mood of the country changed and the mood of a lot of things changed. And so it just sits there as kind of like one last hurrah kind of idea.
Hi, I'm Sheila Malafronte, and we were not at the takeoff, but we were in a boat. It was either the harbor or the bay, and we were celebrating our first anniversary, and we could see it floating after the takeoff. So we weren't quite there, but almost.
You know, over the years, I've met people who had no idea about the balloon, but happened to live along the eastern seaboard all the way up to Maine, and they're just sitting out in their backyard, and they look up, and the balloon floated by, which must have been an extraordinary, because they had no publicity. They didn't know it was coming. They didn't, and it's interesting how many people actually saw it. It went right up the coast. It must have been the most beautiful ride, Sunday afternoon and all through Sunday night, and then all through Monday. It was a beautiful day, and it must have been a gorgeous ride at that point. Yes. Oh, yes.
Hi, my name is Brad Lowen. I don't remember how old I was at the time, but by a strange twist of fate, I was probably farther away from the launch than anybody, but perhaps closer than anybody after the accident. I was serving in the Navy back then. I was aboard a submarine, and we were in our normal Cold War patrol south of Greenland at that time. And they called us off of the patrol, and they gave us orders for search and rescue to look for the balloon. We spent 5 days out there in search and rescue looking for this balloon. And I have to say, I spent 4 years on that boat, and I have to say that this was probably the worst weather that I've ever experienced on.
Oh, dear.
It was incredibly bad. When you're in search and rescue, you have to be on the surface, obviously, because you have to be able to see what you're looking for. But it was so rough, it was so bad, that they wouldn't let us up on deck, and they wouldn't let us go up on the sail. We had to search through the periscopes. Now the periscopes, the top of the sail, which is the conning tower, there's a big combing that goes over the conning tower, and they call it the sail. That's 27 feet tall, and it's about 32 feet off the water, and the periscopes stick up another 12 to 15 feet, depends on which periscope you're looking through. And the seas were breaking over the top of the periscope, so we could see nothing. We searched for 24 hours a day for 5 days with the periscopes, and we could see nothing but water breaking over top of them. Our radar was worthless because it was underwater most of the time, and the sonar was worthless because we didn't, you couldn't hear anything because we were on the surface and the seas were making so much noise. But nonetheless, we spent 5 days out there. I really think that it was a hopeless task. I don't believe that anybody could have survived that kind of weather. But interestingly enough, I had no idea. I knew it was a balloon. They told us that it was a balloon, but I never made the connection that it was this balloon, my hometown, essentially my lot, for a couple of years, and I felt, a connection then, when I discovered that, that
very
intimacy there. I felt a connection, and I'm glad I was there to look for these folks, but truly, I don't think that they really had a chance.
No, yeah. Thank you, Brad. I met Brad at a dinner party a couple of years ago and heard just a little tiny bit of this story, and I just love, over the years, there's always a new story coming out. I didn't know about the Smithsonian, and I certainly didn't know about these submarines surfacing and looking, there have been people have contacted me over the years, filmmakers and psychics and all sorts of interesting, follow-up. It just seems like hardly a year goes by that there is something new about the free life. It's certainly a story that doesn't die, you know. Oh, yes, Dan.
Yeah, I'm Dan Ratiner, and I was out at the lot covering it for Dan's papers, and we wrote up an article about it afterward. A couple of things that I just want to say about it were that there was no doubt in my mind, or in anybody that I knew's mind at that time, I was about 35, who didn't believe they were going to get to England. It was absolutely, in fact, there was something I saw when I was there that it was like it hit me hard that this really wasn't going to make it, which I'll get to. Before the actual launch, a week or 10 days before, I had read things in the Star. I didn't really cover it myself, about how the Bonnickers and the rest of the community had so welcomed the balloonists, and they stayed in their homes, and they were giving them room and board, and it was just this wonderful, loving experience. And I think that most of us who were involved in that movement of the late 60s felt that this was going to completely change the country. It did change the country quite a bit, but I think we expected that it was going to actually transform the country into something new and even more wonderful than we thought it was, although we had our reservations at the time. In any case, I got there with Pam, and I think our sheepdog, I think he was there. And yeah, I said I got there with Pam and our sheepdog probably about an hour and a half before the launch. Or in any case, I thought it was going to happen right away, and it didn't. It took a couple of hours before it went off. At one point, I went over to look inside the gondola, and these were, and what I saw was the flotation, which is astonished. What I said, there was something that astonished me, and that's what it was. The flotation was ping pong balls that were glued to the inside of the basket all around. That was flotation, and I just thought, this is like, what are they doing? I looked around you could just go up and touch it and talk to them, and it was a kind of an experience. And but I still didn't, it didn't overwhelm me in the slightest. I still felt this whole thing was going to work fine. The other parts of this were, and it's probably why we're all here, was the experience of being in that field and that air at that time, and this great light of the springs, and of the tree at the far end, and the horses galloping around. It was just one of the most exhilarating feelings to be part of something that was going to transform everything. And these people were going to go, and during the whole run-up to it, as the main press was there, many local people, particularly us, the younger people, you had the feeling that it was all going to go well, but there was one part of it that I've always felt I saw that I'm not sure I did in retrospect, and I want to bring it up because I have this vivid memory of seeing this happen. As it was about to take off, what they did was they got the balloon up, which took a while, and then I took a picture of Pam holding onto the rope along with Willem de Kooning, which I think she still has, and everyone was like engaged in this whole thing, and we were under the impression that two of them were going to go, which were the Englishman and Brown, Rob.
Yeah.
And he made a speech before he got in the balloon. The other guy was in it, and the speech basically was that this was a dream come true. They were going to do this. They were going to be successful. And he had transformed his life. He'd left Wall Street. He was now part of the anti-establishment movement. And this was just the thing they were going to. The name he had talked about how they named the balloon the Free Life, as I pretty well recall that about this is the free life that we are now embarking upon. And the part of this that is in dispute in my mind, because I think when you witness something that's quite as extraordinary as this, maybe even in retrospect you think you saw something that you didn't. But what I remember was, as it was taking off, it was sitting on the ground and it started bumping a little bit, and people were holding it down, and the two of them were in it. And as it moved further, Pam Brown came running over, and this is what I saw, in tears, and said, I'm going, I'm coming, I'm coming. And then they pulled her in, and then off it went. It bumped once or twice, and then it was up over everyone's heads, and it was slowly rising and going horizontally, mostly. And then it got up and got smaller and smaller, and we all left, all excited. Next time we were going to hear anything about this was going to be from England. That's how we all felt about it. And it was one of the most emotionally awful experiences to realize what happened to them and to imagine what happened to them in the days that followed. And then her father, Mr. Brown, after the Coast Guard and the others had given up hope of finding the boat, they spent a whole ton of money to hire more the planes to continue on, and it was all a hopeless thing.
Well, we do have the film to show that Pam was in the gondola well before takeoff. She was there when they broke open the champagne, and she was the camerawoman. She had the camera, and she took as they took off. She was filming everybody running after the balloon, and then she threw that film overboard, and they retrieved it. And I have a copy of it, but it is literally 30 seconds, and it's just a lot of people running. It's not as fun and as good as I wanted it to be, but I do have a copy of that in the archives at LTV.
Hi, my name is Jack Conkin. I live on Talmadge Farm Lane, and at the time I lived on 6th Street and Gardner Avenue, and I came out from the city to cut my lawn, and I looked up, and there it was over the dog park heading up in that direction. And it was a sight in my mind I'll never forget.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. They had a lot of troubles with the design of the balloon the year before. They had a test flight in Idaho, and the balloon came down in that test flight, and there were some faults. They were hoping that they were going to go from Idaho to the East Coast and break a long distance, but they came down, and after 4 hours, there was a fault in the balloon, so they had to go back. And of course, and that delayed it another year. But the thing was just eating up money. It was, Rod always called it the, the monster in the backyard, because it wouldn't go away. It just kept wanting more and more attention and more money. And so they were having money problems, a lot of money problems. And I think they got very cautious at that point. Yes.
How come you didn't go?
You know, I mean, I think at that last moment, I think everybody, well, not everybody, but so many people that were there. I know Clarence Barnes would have gone in a nanosecond. I mean, the enthusiasm and the confidence, and just as Dan said, we all believed in it so much, and it just seemed like, how could anything so beautiful, and these beautiful young people, you know, how could anything go wrong? And I guess I'm more of a stay-at-home person, but you know, there was that feeling when Dan says Pam rushed and hopped in the balloon. I think there were half a dozen of us that would have done that in a second. Yeah.
All I want to say is, let's put good life sub good time. Brought a whole community together, and we're still talking about it, and yay.
Yes, yes, very
That's
good.
all I want.
Anybody else got anything? Oh, yes, okay. Just come forward, because the camera can't find you behind that.
Hi, I'm Lucia Miller. Actually, I'm loud. I probably don't need this. I was 12 years old at the time,
My mom is over there on the stool. My parents, Don and Lucia Miller, took me, and my brother went. And we just thought this was the most magical thing. My dad was a private pilot, so he was very interested in this because he'd never obviously flown hot air balloons, but he thought that this was something that we should see, that we should experience, and that it was happening right here in Uncle George's field where, you know, we had all taken riding lessons and where we'd spent a large part of our childhood hanging out. And my only memory of it really is that it was just sort of an amazing day. Even later when we found out what had happened, I know that obviously people were upset. At 12, I don't recall being too upset. I mean, we didn't know these people. But for us, it was not a loss of innocence. For us, it was sort of someone had tried something, and that was the important thing, that they had gone up, they had tried this. It had unfortunately ended badly, but it was just really part of, for me as a kid, what our mindset was at the time, that anything was possible, you could try anything, and that the important thing was to keep trying and to keep moving along with it, which is what we did. And I thought it was an amazing day. I will never forget that day.
Oh, very well said. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was, yeah.
No, I think we all treasure.
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, for Springs, it was
important that it happened to us. And
yeah, it was an extraordinary event. Howard, you were there.
I was there, yes.
You want to say anything?
Well, we weren't living here at the time, and my friend David Davidson, we were visiting him.
This is just for the television. It's not for the room.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But basically, we were visiting, and we came out, and he said, "Would you like to see this event?" So we went down there, and I had experience, a lot of experience in something what used to be called Volcoons, which are the hot air balloons. And I said to David at the time, I said, "I think this is insanity." That's what I saw. When I saw it happen, I said, these people, I don't know what their experience is, but it's beautiful as an experience on that level. But I said, I don't know if they're going to be able to make it at that time. Yeah.
I think there were quite a few people who didn't feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Based on my previous experience on that, and I just, you know, one of the things about it is hope springs eternal.
Mhm.
All right, and doing crazy things. I think most of us either dream of doing something crazy, or have done something crazy in their life. So you understand this very well.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? This has been great. I tell you, this has been wonderful. Yep, okay.
I'm Chuck Hitchcock, and this is my spouse, David Wilton. We were living at 25 Rutland Road at that point, and that Saturday and Sunday was Parents' Weekend at Southampton College, so I drove by, saw it, and then heard about what happened. But I need to know from you, it is our understanding that the little house that they lived in before they went up is now a part of our house.
It is.
It is.
Do they ever come back and tap on the window? All the time. Yes, yes. That house was donated to them, as somebody said. I mean, the people of Springs just opened their doors and their hearts and, you know, everything. And yes, yeah. But that was a free house, and all the food came from Barnes Store, and Clarence and Dorothy Barnes were really close to them, and I'm so sorry they're not here with us, because Clarence died this year, and Dorothy right before him, I think. So, any rate, anybody else? One last thing. Michael, you were there.
My recollections are very much like Dan's and Jeannie's. The thing I remember most was this wonderful spirit. I think we were all young. I'm sure there were older people there, but it didn't seem that way.
Mm-hmm.
1970 was an interesting time. It was kind of countercultural. We weren't always playing by the rules, and there was never any doubt in my mind that this balloon was going to land on the other side. We were all optimistic, I think, about this flight, and we were optimistic generally about life then.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a wonderful moment.
Yes, great, wonderful. We have lots of food and drink if anybody wants to, and we'll put the film back on. Is there anybody else who has?
I think Miss Miller said it very well. Most of us, like me, stay at home. We're scared, we're safe. But Columbus, the explorers, the Challenger, which ended in tragedy, the man walked on the moon in 1969. These were the people that had the spirit, and I think that's what we should remember. The positive, it's there, we want to do it, we're going to do it, and we can remember the failures, but how glorious the triumph.
Well said. Thank you. That's lovely.